Two teams dueling it out. Got a little Pro Bowl games in between. We got some media week next week. But in terms of actual competitive football, there was one game left on our docket.
Can't believe we're here, man. Can't believe we have to wait 2 weeks for it. But that 2 weeks will pale in comparison to the roughly 8 months we have to spend between that and the following football game. This is always the time when it starts to hit me that the season's basically over, and it's sad. But at the same time, right now the news world is going bonkers around the league. So we're not even going to get to that game until probably like 1:53 p.m. So let's hunker down and try to get through some of the real news today, Cal.
Yeah, there was a point on Sunday where I'm like, all right, we're staring down the barrel of a slow news day. I guess we're going to do some injury report stuff beforehand, like maybe some comment stuff. No, we are hard hitting. Let's kick it off, Jackson, with the news everyone woke up to this morning. Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback Tom Brady officially for real this time. We'll see how that holds out, but announced on the beats this morning that he will be retiring after 23 seasons in the NFL. Does so via his own social media accounts, gets to do it on his own this time. Again, 1 year to the day of his last retirement. Jackson, where were you when you heard the news the first time? Where were you today when you heard the news the second time?
I don't remember exactly where I was last year. I do know that we podcasted together on that day in the same room, and that was definitely like kind of a weird experience. I think we might have found out really close to showtime. We're like, oh, he just retired. I guess we should lead the show with that. Similar experience today where we woke up, found out the news, or like, I'm sure I was awake when the news broke, but like found out earlier in the day and was, I guess that leads our show now. So lead the show, Cale. Talk about Tom Brady retiring.
Jackson, I don't know what you're talking about. I found out on a ski mountain in Mount Snow in Vermont. But whatever.
Where were you there?
Sorry, that makes for some lack of yes and improv there. But massive news nonetheless. Jackson, 7-time Super Bowl champion, 3-time MVP, 5-time Super Bowl MVP. I just want to throw this list up on the screen from CBS Sports, Jackson. This is a list of every single record that Tom Brady currently holds. It is CVS receipts levels of long. Also, in addition, has 2 of the top 5 seasons all time by passing DVOA among quarterbacks. Also, 2 of the most recent top 5 or both of which were the most recent performances. Also, has the best single season DYAR performance among quarterbacks. Jackson, a bit of a disappointing year, losing the wild card round to the Dallas Cowboys, an 8-9 season. Down year, still finishes well by our metrics, but by all accounts, a down year. Probably hangs it up a year too late, but at the same time, it is nice to know that there were no questions left on the table.
I mean, last year he would have kind of gone out in a blaze of glory. I mean, he had maybe 3 opportunities. You could even argue 4 opportunities to retire on top, like literally after a Super Bowl victory at a somewhat advanced age. The most recent of which, you're 43, you went to a new team, you brought a bunch of star players with you. That would have been the perfect opportunity to go out on top, but that was never how it was going to end for Brady. I mean, this was a guy who said basically a decade ago, I'm going to play until I suck. And I don't even know if he really lived up to that mantra, but certainly the team around him, how much of a role you want to say he played in that team kind of sucked this year. Going to be honest, I think they could have easily won 5 games, and the fact that they did get to 8 is kind of a credit to Brady and his fourth quarter abilities, but it was never going to be a graceful exit. It was always going to be Tom Brady playing football until he just can't play football anymore. And he could probably still play more football, but what a dang career. Just the longevity, the numbers, the compilation. I mean, pick one off that list. They can all be your favorite. It's an incredible achievement.
My personal one is probably 4 touchdowns, most games at 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 28. That's like at least one a year of those performances. That's an impressive one. Jackson, it's time. It's what's the most important thing about this. It's Kyle Trask time.
Oh boy.
It is really interesting that this was kind of pitched as this, like, the entire media cycle yesterday was like, could Tom Brady play for the San Francisco 49ers? With news of Brock Purdy's UCL injury, which we'll get to. Really interesting to see him take this route. There was some reporting from ESPN basically saying it was either return to the Bucs or retire. There was never no let's do a third team sort of thing. But now there's a division which, as currently, is very much lacking in quarterback talent. You have Desmond Ridder as the leader for the Atlanta Falcons, the aforementioned Kyle Trask as the current projected starting quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I am not sure the New Orleans Saints have a quarterback rostered outside of Taysom Hill, who's been now reverted back totally to his tight end, maybe Ian Book. And the Carolina Panthers, main man Sam Darnold, looking like the best time he could have to lead a division before eventually getting usurped by whatever quarterback the Carolina Panthers take in the draft. But Brady in a vacuum leaving the NFC South, leaves the division in a big vacuum, a wake that we did not expect would be this decimated upon his exit.
Yeah, well, for starters, there is one quarterback under contract. It's Jameis for $12.8 million next year. They do have it out of that with $11 million in dead cap. But if they want Jameis back for $12.8, he's there. Other than that, I think that's a division where you're considering trade ups in the draft, funky free agent signings. I mean, 36-year-old Andy Dalton could be re-signed by the Saints or could sign somewhere else and compete against the Saints twice next year. I really don't have a clue of who ends up where. I think Will Levis ends up in this division somehow, whether that's Carolina or one of the other teams trades up. I guess Atlanta probably has like the clearest picture. It's like, all right, it's Desmond Ridder's time to get a chance next year, but it's a weird division. It was coming into the year, and it's only getting weirder with the most stable quarterback in the league, a 45-year-old, heading out.
Who'd have thought? Well, Jackson, if the New Orleans Saints have the potential to move up the way you say you do, they'll have better able to do so now. The Denver Broncos have traded for the rights to sign Sean Payton as their head coach, Jackson. New Orleans Saints will receive a 29th overall pick in this draft, as well as the Broncos' 2024 second-round pick. Broncos get Payton and the 2024 third. This eventually works out because of the way this trade is structured. This essentially works out as a day two trade down, swapping Bradley Chubb for Sean Payton. This is the pick that the Denver Broncos acquired by trading away Bradley Chubb. Jackson, in the 15 years that Sean Payton has coached in the NFL, has 12 finishes inside the top 10 of offensive DVOA and 2 additional finishes in 11th place. But you look at the laundry list of the pick that they have essentially eschewed to pick up Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, now 3 firsts and 3 seconds over 2022 to 2024. That is a haul for 2 teams combined, plus additional player resources. Jackson, somewhere to go at this point for the Denver Broncos, moving on from Nathaniel Hackett. Really interesting move. One of only 4 coaches ever traded for, one of 5 ever traded for National Football. Payton to the Broncos. I had no idea to dismount from that. I'm sorry I kept going.
I don't believe he's one of only 5 that have been traded. There have been 4 other coaches that have been traded and won Super Bowls. So, like, there's precedent here. You never know if the Broncos might be able to, like, get something done because they traded for a coach. You think, like, oh, that move doesn't seem like it would work out historically. Don Shula, Bill Belichick, John Gruden first time to the Bucs, and Bruce Arians from the Cardinals to the Bucs. So the Bucs have successfully traded for 2 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, folks. And if you want more nuggets on this trade, because I have a bunch, how about the Dolphins basically giving up 2 first-round picks along the way for Sean Payton to go to the Broncos? I find that one quite interesting. Also, that pick is originally from the Trey Lance deal, which just continues to have ripple effects. And we also have a spot for Trey Lance booked out on our show. So the league works out in very funny ways sometimes. But for the Broncos, the interesting wrinkle in all this is that yesterday, Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter are having a little bit of a source-off. Ian Rappaport saying, hey, the Broncos made this late push for DeMeco Ryans, and when that didn't work out, they finally, sealed the deal with Payton, which would be seemingly just catastrophic from an optics perspective. Like, oh, we settled on this guy, but we also gave up a first-round pick for him. Whereas Schefter says, no, he was their guy all along, and the timing of the two was completely coincidental. So no matter how he got there, Sean Payton's the new head coach in Denver, and Denver's offense could really use some work if you hadn't watched football this year. 29th in total offensive DVOA. Russell Wilson, 29th in DYAR, negative 136. So, hey, get your quarterback whisperer in there, see how it works out.
What are your thoughts on it, Jackson? I mean, Aaron Schatz said on Twitter that by our numbers, Payton is worth a low first-round pick. I believe it was Kevin Cole from Unexpected Points said that Payton would outright be a steal for a first-round pick. A proven track record of success, but also you look at the scheme that Payton's drawing up, especially second era, like last 5 years in New Orleans, not the offense you expect Russell Wilson to be able to handle, or like not exactly the offense Russell Wilson is uniquely positioned to excel in, given his current state in Denver.
Yeah, although I do think it reverted back to some of the more Russell Wilsonian tendencies in 2021 with Jameis, as opposed to, I mean, when you have dead arm Drew Brees for 4 years, your quick game is pretty much going to be everything. And obviously that's not historically what Russell Wilson's been known for. But I think Payton, not necessarily his calling card as a head coach, but something that I do think he's as good at as most coaches out there, especially offensive-minded ones, is molding his offense to the talent he actually has at quarterback. So you win games with, stiff 40-year-old Drew Brees. I feel like you can get more out of Russell Wilson. Now, whether that translates to winning more games, I think there's a lot of other things they need to address, whether it's the line, whether it's figuring out if the skill group you have around him is the right mix and you just need to better utilize them, or you go out and get someone else. But yeah, I mean, from a value perspective, I think there's a big difference here between if the Broncos are trading their own pick, which would have been number 5, had they not already owed it to Seattle, and 29, it's like, who knows who's going 29? Cole Strange went 29th to the Pats this past year. Could be great, could be totally irrelevant in 5 years. So I think knowing what you have in a head coach there, I don't mind the value of the trade.
Ricochet shot at Cole Strange, one of the a very productive interior lineman for the New England Patriots.
Need to figure it out as the year went along, yes.
Well, Jackson is not the only head coaching vacancy that was filled basically minutes within proximity to the Sean Payton deal. Houston Texans signed DeMeco Ryans to a 6-year contract. Ryans returns to the team that drafted him in 2006. Was Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2006 when they drafted him. Also picked up a first-team All-Pro nomination. Rose his way up through the ranks of the San Francisco 49ers and took over the role of defensive coordinator upon Robert Saleh accepting the New York Jets job. Ryans, in both years as defensive coordinator, finished top 10, led the league in defensive DVOA this year. Thoughts on the hire, Jackson? It is 4 straight years now of the Houston Texans ranking 22nd or worse by defensive DVOA. I know, at least from JJ Watt's Twitter, some of Houston Texans Twitter, a lot of the Texans excited about this one.
As they should be, this was kind of the guy, I think, in the head coaching search this year. Like, there always seems to be someone who can get basically any job they want. And maybe this wasn't the year with the most attractive slate of head coaching options because there wasn't really a team out there that had a franchise quarterback. But I think from the Texans' perspective, one, there's the historical pull, right? That's your organization. You came up in it. Two, the Texans did show better as the year went on, and there are legitimately talented young players on that team. You look at a Derek Stingley, who was drafted 3rd overall last year, and you expect Ryans to get the most out of him. Jalen Petrie ends up having like the most tackles by anyone in anyone's secondary this past year. So there's a lot to like about this roster. You obviously need a quarterback, and that's what you're going to address with your number 2 pick, or if you end up trading for the Bears' number 1 pick, like that guy's coming into the building. And I think for Ryans, it's okay. How do I manage the maturation of that quarterback as a defensive head coach? Because we know that can be a great recipe or a terrible one. And how do I get the most out of this defense, which I think played a lot better as the year went on, not just because of the talent, but I mean, you look at weighted DVOA, they're 12th. So they end the season at 22nd, but they really picked up steam as it went along. And I think with Ryans, they're just going to hit the ground running next year.
Some impressive performances against the Tennessee Titans, played a couple surprisingly close games down the stretch. Their pass rush is really generated like exclusively through players, which has been a really interesting revelation. But you're right, a ton of young defensive talent. And I think, outside of quarterback, that has to be the focus. Like, that's the focus of this hire. He's getting back to a defensive identity, which Houston really embraced for so long during, late aughts, early 2010. Really had a strong defensive stretch there. And you just love to see a nice homecoming story.
Yeah.
Feels like a really good embrace there. Houston, I don't know. Him and Ryan's playing together. Like, it's just a fun environment for it. It's a nice story.
I think that, we'll see what they can do in the pass rush department, but I also think you coach to what you have on the roster, and what they have right now is obviously a pretty talented young secondary. Those teams in the late aughts, early 2010s had J.J. Watt. So are you going to be able to find, an 80% of a J.J. Watt? Who knows? But I think what Ryans is going to do is not only maximize the production from that group, but figure out what their best defensive identity is going to be based on who he has next year. And that's what you're not going to get a Fred Warner and Nick Bosa in there, unfortunately, but he's shown that he can utilize the most talented players he has in the most efficient possible way.
I think that is a big part of the 49ers identity. Honestly, just the fact that they've been able to deal with so much injury and a lot of turnover in the secondary as well throughout the season, and still produce great numbers. Final head coaching vacancy filled. Carolina Panthers hire former Indianapolis head coach Frank Reich as their new head coach. Reich was fired midseason, replaced by Jeff Saturday after a slow start to the year. Reich, despite a 40-33-1 record with the team, had a different quarterback in each of his first 5 seasons in week 1 for the Indianapolis Colts. Constant turnover at the position. They make 2 plays for big guys late. And now he's going to have an opportunity to get his guy and actually mold a young talent. Should be noted, Steve Wilks also heavily in the running for this job. I said it on Monday's show with Aaron and Brian, and I think you'd hopefully say the same. These 2 statements don't have to be mutually exclusive. This is a good hire for the Panthers, a team that's looking to, retool and build out a quarterback. But at the same time, Steve Wilks, who vastly overperformed after taking over from Matt Rule, little short-sticked in this, little screwed over.
And it's the second time that Steve Wilks has been completely screwed over. He's twice been in the position of, not to say head coach in name only, but we will give you the head coach job, but don't consider you the long-term solution. And that's more inherent with an interim job. But I think a story that we just don't acknowledge that much anymore is how badly Steve Wilks got screwed over by the Cardinals in 2018. a team that is now back on the market for head coaches and conspicuously did not interview Steve Wilks this time around. So I do really emphasize with Wilks, and I think it's, for better or worse, obviously emblematic of a larger problem in a league that's 70% black, but has 3 active black head coaches at this time. Regardless, Frank Reich, an offensive-minded head coach, 7 of the 9 candidates they interviewed were offensive-minded, and the Panthers have never had an offensive-minded head coach so far since their franchise started in 1995. So it makes sense that they would want to go this direction, and that's kind of what both owner and GM talked about in the wake of the hire, was wanting to, you look at the Final Four this past weekend, all 4 head coaches were defensive-minded. That's not even counting people like Brian Dable, who made it to the previous round. So makes sense, but you obviously feel for Steve Wilks, and you hope that he lands a job elsewhere, whether that's this year or not.
All 4 were offensive-minded, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I might have said that backwards, but yes, all 4 offensive-minded.
Yes. And I believe the owner as well came out and basically gave a statement essentially saying, how could you not hire, like I'm paraphrasing, how could you not hire an offensive guy considering rule changes around the league? You have the most advantage hiring an offensive head coach and directing your team that way. Also have an opportunity, they draft Matt Corral 3rd round last year. They're picking 6th overall this year. Could be in a position for like maybe a Stroud, a Levis. It'll be interesting to see Frank Reich, who's often so highly touted as this quarterback whisperer, as someone who's his whole thing is molding teams around quarterback. What he got famous for out of Philly, why he came to Indianapolis. It'll be interesting to see what he's able to do with some new blood in the mix.
Did text Andrew Luck this past year asking if he might want to come back. So maybe Andrew Luck will come back to the Panthers. Who knows?
If he wouldn't play for the Colts, Jackson, I don't think he'll play for the Carolina Panthers.
Why not? Who's got it worse than the Colts?
He's enjoying himself. Isn't it like he's going to grad school now? He's getting his master's. He's doing.
I went to grad school. If someone asked me to come play QB for the Panthers, I would have definitely thought about it.
There are 2.
It's funny.
There are 2 vacancies still available in the head coaching market. One is the aforementioned Arizona Cardinals, who've recently conducted interviews with both Cincinnati Bengals coordinators Lou Anarumo on Wednesday and Brian Callahan on Thursday. Believe they also tried to get in on the Payton deal, found out they were out, and pivoted.
They had him in the building last week. He was there. He was in their hands. Got away.
Other popular finalists, Denver Broncos defensive coordinator Hiro Rivera, former Miami Dolphins head coach and current Pittsburgh Steelers assistant Brian Flores, also Aaron Glenn. They interviewed Mike Kafka. Jackson, Colts, bit of a crapshoot. I think the only thing we don't know is that Jeff Saturday is not a head coaching candidate. They have interviewed Callahan, Avero, Aaron Glenn, Mike Kafka, Eric Bieniemy, Rich Bisaccia, Wink Martindale, Raheem Morris, Shane Steichen, Bubba Ventrone, and the aforementioned Saturday. No real headwinds in terms of what direction they're headed in at all. Is there anything additional you can give us about either of these openings?
I mean, the Colts have brought seemingly everyone in for second interviews. The whole who's a finalist, who's not for that job gets extremely confusing extremely fast. Just today, I wake up to see if there's any more news, and all I see are speculative blogs like, is this still all just a ruse to hire Jeff Saturday? And honestly, nothing would surprise me at this point. I would be surprised if Shane Steichen gets passed over this round of head coaching opportunities, but at the same time, I mean, he's not active as far as we know in that Cardinals process, and I don't think this Colts opening is particularly attractive. So I don't know where that leaves us, and certainly, you look at both Giants coordinators in the mix for this job. I mean, they're just pulling from everywhere. They're pulling from the Bengals. They're pulling from the Rams. This could really go any direction. So I'm infinitely curious to see where the Colts end up going with this.
Someone did make a reference to by this list, the Colts have kind of just been meandering to me, while it feels like the Cardinals have kind of been in on these close deals. They were pretty heavily interviewing Ryans at one point, or had Ryans in the building at some point, had Payton in the building last week, miss out on both guys there. There was a reference, I forget who it was on Twitter, and I forgive not mentioning it, but essentially likening the last time this happened resulted in the Arizona Cardinals last second hiring Bruce Arians, which worked out really well for the franchise. And maybe they luck out because Lou Anarumo's name was not mentioned on any major head coaching, was considered heavily as one of the best coordinators in the league and just wasn't really drawing interviews. Maybe that's a product of them still being involved in the postseason. Maybe it's just source of negligence on the coaching front, but I wouldn't hate it for them. I think it would be a fantastic hire, a guy that's preached so heavily an ability to generate defensive versatility and show so many different looks against teams and attack so many people on so many different fronts. It'd be a bit of a lucky hire for them falling into that spot, but a good one nonetheless. Any predictions on where either of these end up going?
Well, first of all, I think that is always an interesting domino, is like postseason elimination for top candidates. I don't know if maybe Shane Steichen would have gotten a job with one of these other teams by now if his team had lost instead of DeMeco Ryans' team on Sunday. These coaches, they'll take interviews while they're still in it, but it's not that it's impossible, but it certainly feels like a bit unlikely that someone like a DeMeco Ryans would take a job while their team was still going. At the same time, you never know if, they make the Super Bowl and it's like clock's ticking, DeMeco, maybe that domino does fall. So in this case, yeah, you see Anarumo and Callahan are now both out. Steichen's still in. Eric Bieniemy, who's, potentially a finalist for the Colts, also still in. And you wonder how long these teams are willing to wait. I think now that we're down to 2, they'll be more willing to wait, especially when there's not too much crossover between their lists aside from Evero and Aaron Glenn. So yeah, if I'm predicting it right now, I think the Cardinals do end up going with one of the Bengals guys, and I might lean more Callahan just because, Kyler Murray is the one thing that is still going to be there in a few years, and you want to pair him with an offensive mind. But I wouldn't be surprised or upset if they went Anarumo. And then, yeah, if I'm the Colts, I want Shane Steichen. I don't know if he's going there because that, like I said, is probably the least attractive job opening. But I'm pitching Shane Steichen hard if I'm the Colts.
Jackson head coaching vacates. Let me just reel that one back. The coaching spots weren't the only thing filled this week. We have a big coordinator roundup. Let's kick it off with LA. LA hires. This would have originally been Dallas fires offensive or mutually part ways with offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. 18 hours later, he's in LA for the OC job. Apparently, according to Rappaport, this had been in the works for a little bit. He was apparently unemployed for several minutes, basically. That was part of the mutual parting of ways. And the second the writing was on the wall, Chargers kind of swooped in there. Jackson, what are your thoughts on it? Because I personally am a pretty big fan.
Yeah, I think this is one of those cases where it made sense for both teams, and I'm not upset. But it is also funny that these were two very interconnected teams in terms of playoff teams with quarterbacks under contract who had some shortcomings, had some disappointing postseason exits, and we knew there was going to be change in the offseason. So the first domino falls when the Chargers choose to keep Brandon Staley, fire Joe Lombardi, and, bow out of the Sean Payton race, basically. At that point, the whole discussion becomes who's the new offensive coordinator coming in? What's he going to be able to do to get us out of the dumpster we were in this year when we have this incredibly talented quarterback who is throwing for 4.5 yards every first down? Meanwhile, you have the Cowboys where, they're putting up all these points when Dak's returning, but that's a little bit misleading, right? They're the number one scoring defense. They're actually middle of the pack in offensive DVOA in games that Dak is even playing with them. Everyone's lambasting the play calling in the postseason, and there's, apparently, as we're finding out, some friction between McCarthy and Kellen Moore. So, like you said, makes sense for both sides, and I think that the Chargers here are benefiting in the sense that they get this offensive mind who's shown his ability to have a lot of success and just was in the wrong set of circumstances this past year. Now he gets to re-energize, get with a new quarterback, get with a pretty talented skill group. They could probably use one more addition somewhere in there, but the Chargers offense has all the right tools, and they'll get I get the Rashawn Slater. That's their left tackle. He's coming back next year healthy. So you should be in a good position to be productive again. Just a case of whether or not Kellen Moore can recapture that old 2019 magic.
I mean, I'm liking it from this perspective. You get 2 top 10 DVOA finishes in offense out of Moore. This is obviously their worst season. That's 2 out of the 4 years he's been there. Big thing for me just comes down to the sheer departure of Joe Lombardi. Since Kellen Moore, this is from Mina Kimes on Twitter, since Kellen Moore has been the offensive coordinator for Dallas, 7th highest ADOT in the league, these guys are going to be striking deep downfield. It's no more spam and stick. They'll actually have a slightly more aggressive passing offensive targeting downfield. That's a good thing to have when you have Justin Herbert at quarterback. I also just think, there's one more thing I was going to add, now I'm totally blanking on it, and I might just pivot out of it.
Well, if you're thinking about, go ahead, yeah, if you found it.
The one thing I was going to add, now McCarthy's just calling plays. This is a big loss for Dallas. McCarthy's back to going plays, which was such a wishy-washy sort of thing in Green Bay. When he did it in Green Bay, it was pretty tepid play calling, and he kind of gave it back and forth a couple different times. There's now talk potentially bringing Brian Schottenheimer as your OC, which is I don't know. I don't know if you want Brian Schottenheimer to be your saver if you're the Dallas Cowboys. I like it a lot from the perspective of the Chargers, and I understand the need for change, and I think a guy that usually survives, he was OC for Jason Garrett, survived the head coaching change from Garrett to McCarthy, took over play calling responsibilities at that time and held that for 3-4 years. I think that's, a sign of a good candidate. I think he's going to be great. I understand the need for change, but I'd be a little bit nervous offensively if I was Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas, get ready for a crazy soap opera season next year if this one wasn't enough of one already, because you're going to have Mike McCarthy's play calling coming under fire every week. You could even see the bingo card where he gives it back and forth to whoever ends up coming in to fill that, ghost OC role. You're going to have Jerry Jones going on the radio every week talking about Mike McCarthy's performance, saying his job is safe one week, not answering questions on it the next week. And, who knows where all that ends up. But for a franchise that, I don't know if you heard, Cale, they haven't won or they haven't gone to a conference championship in 25 years. Who knows? This is going to be a pivotal Dallas season, I think, kind of the most telling season of the McCarthy era, and whether it's got legs. I mean, I suppose it already does, but I think either he stays or goes next year, and that I think is dependent on whether or not they get to a conference championship game.
Jackson, next up, the Atlanta Falcons fill a couple of needs on their defensive end at their defensive coordinator position. Let's kick it off with Ryan Nielsen, who they hired as their defensive coordinator, most recently coming over from the New Orleans Saints, big NFC South rivalry there. Originally came on as the defensive line coach, 2017. Takes over briefly as assistant head coach in 2021, eventually being promoted to co-defensive coordinator 2022, now a full-time defensive coordinator. Falcons also make a second hire, though. Falcons make an additional hire Jerry Gray, bringing 26 years of NFL coaching experience from Atlanta, 8 of those as a defensive coordinator, most recently served as the Green Bay Packers defensive backs coach and passing game coordinator. Previously worked with Arthur Smith. Decent ads, Jackson, for a team that has really lacked in defense the last few years.
Yeah, I think I like it in a sense that if you're going to point at the number one deficiency of the Atlanta defense, it is a pass rush, like just the existence of one overall. You look at 39 sacks in the past 2 seasons combined, 19 teams had more than that just this season alone. So they're not getting any pressure on the quarterback whatsoever. So you bring in the replacement defensive coordinator to just say, like, your main responsibility is to build us a pass rush and make us more physical and competent up front. Meanwhile, you're also bringing in Gray, who has this pedigree as more of a passing game coordinator, and he can still kind of fill that functionality in a slightly elevated title. So I think, sometimes when you have like 2 guys running an offense, 2 guys running a defense, whether or not you name one of them coordinator, you're like, is this going to work out? When it was Miami with co-offensive coordinators 2 years ago under Flores, you're like, this seems like a disaster waiting to happen. This, I think the opposite. It's like you're hiring guys who, haven't held coordinator positions before, or Gray did in Buffalo like 10 years ago, but not like big name, sexy hires of people we were considering as like top candidates, like Vic Fangio, who we're about to talk about, but people who have shown their ability to be successful in specific aspects of the defense and molding them together to hopefully just elevate the overall product, which, as you know, has been quite disappointing in Atlanta.
Each of the years that Nielsen has been with the Saints in some capacity, Saints have produced a top 10 finish in defensive DVOA. That's nothing to turn your nose up at.
Yeah.
In addition, Gray coming in for a Packers defense that relatively underperformed expectations, but got, solid, admirable performances out of their secondary, especially producing good season out of Rasul Gary last year. Jackson, I do want to sneak one more in before we get to Vic Fangio.
Shouldn't be sneaky. We forgot
one hire entirely, Jackson.
Yeah.
New York Jets hired former Denver Broncos head coach and former Green Bay Packers quarterbacks coach Nathaniel Hackett.
They did. They did.
There isn't a lot more to say on that front. Their former coach, Mike LaFleur, goes to the Rams under Sean McVay as their OC. Jackson Hackett fired as head coach, 29th ranked offensive DVOA. Got some top 10 seasons by DVOA in 3 straight years while with the Green Bay Packers. But a fascinating Tobias Funke level development of it didn't work for them, but it may work for us. I understand Hackett's father was a former OC for the Jets in the early aughts. But this is a very interesting move to me.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you have to mention the Aaron Rodgers piece of this, right? And that's where even your like it didn't work for them, it might work for us reference comes in, is like whether or not they'll ever admit it, Denver was hoping to get Rodgers last year. And that Hackett hiring, regardless of whether or not they thought that he could still produce with another quarterback, was at least in some part aimed at getting Rodgers. And I think if I'm just reading the tea leaves here, I kind of see that happening again here. Not that Hackett hasn't called good plays in the past for other offenses. It's been mentioned that not only just his track record with Rodgers, but he also takes Blake Bortles to a conference championship game in Jacksonville. So there's a track record there. And, being a head coach and being a coordinator, 2 tremendously different things. Hackett can call plays. He can't call timeouts at the right time. We know that for sure. So take that responsibility out of his hands. And I think that whether or not this is like increasing the odds of Rodgers going there, I think the odds of Rodgers going there to begin with were pretty good. So I'm interested to see if that does indeed bear out, because if I'm just predicting whether or not it does right now, I'm going to say it does. I'm a Rodgers to the Jets believer.
I mean, Rodgers is yet to even confirm whether he's playing next year. I wonder if that answer changes with today's Brady announcement.
Oh no, Cale. I think Aaron Rodgers definitely wants to go into the Hall of Fame with Tom Brady and J.J. Watt. He's good friends with those guys. He doesn't want the limelight. He just wants to, be next to some friends on stage when he gets his gold jacket.
I was more thinking of like a reflective time of like, where have all the Cowboys gone? Like, I'm the last guy hanging on. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to keep sticking around this league and going to a new team is worth it. But yeah, that also like, sure, the Hall of Fame spotlight thing is an interesting debate. My thing is just more like, with Rodgers' current contract restructure or not, I don't want to deal with current iteration Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett. I feel like we've seen enough replacement level quarterback play this year alone, whether it was like in backups performing above expectation or, quarterbacks that have previously underperformed, like a Geno Smith and Daniel Jones, exceeding expectations and earning some, new ceiling in their market cap. If a Derek Carr's available, I'd rather throw 5 picks at Lamar Jackson after the Ravens franchise tag him than try and go get 39 to 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers right now. Like, I'd try even a backup quarterback plus take a Anthony Richardson / Hendon Hooker type. Like, the Jets have gotten so much goodwill in this year alone after being notoriously hated for like a decade plus and getting absolutely nothing right. It is shocking to see them just pivot this quickly and go all in. Theoretically, obviously, nothing confirmed yet because I haven't gotten Rodgers. But like, to see them hypothetically go so in on this like all in right now model, I get it. But like, they've built something really good in the last year here with Saleh and Douglas in terms of the talent they've been able to bring in. Mortgaging it all now for short-term game is an interesting move, to say the least, in my opinion.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Like, I get your point.
Windows are a thing, but like doing it for this specific duo to lead the team is questionable to me.
Yeah, but you talk about replacement level quarterback play. I think what we saw this year was that has its limits too. Like, that can only get you so far. And granted, there weren't teams that really had like that good replacement that also had good rosters around him. But the Jets are like that case where like maybe they go to the conference championship with Geno Smith, but I can't see them getting past it, right? So it depends on like what your goal is with the Jets. If your goal is just to make the playoffs next year and preserve your cap health long term, then yeah, I totally get running it back and drafting someone in the late first round and seeing what happens. But if the goal is like to actually contend in the AFC next year, like you do have to make a splash at quarterback. And I totally agree. I'd rather have Lamar if I'm them. I think there are 26 teams that should go after Lamar this year. Like, if you don't have Herbert, Burrow, Mahomes, arguably Hurts, Lawrence, like one of those guys, then yeah, go after Lamar. Absolutely. But I think in terms of more realistic transactions, I sort of see the winds blowing towards that Rodgers move.
I know the winds are blowing there. I'm just not saying it's taking you to safe shores.
Maybe it's not, but I respect it. I respect the gambit.
Let's get the last head coaching news in, which is kind of news. Tom Pelissero of NFL Network originally reported that the Miami Dolphins had signed defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. We did a whole little Monday tidbit on it during the Monday show. Me, Brian, and Aaron talking it out. More recent news, however, suggested there is nothing currently concrete about the Vic Fangio deal, according to Mike Kliss of KUSA TV in the Florida area. For what it's worth, Vic Fangio told me late last night, nothing has been decided on my end. There's a huge amount of mutual respect between Shanahan and Fangio, a highly successful see under Jim Harbaugh, and it appears the 49ers will have an opening soon. They obviously do now with the hiring of DeMeco. There could be some flip-flop. However, after an appearance on the Pat McAfee show, NFL Network's Ian Rappaport said the Niners are potentially in the mix, but his personal prediction was that Fangio would go to the Dolphins. So nothing confirmed yet. Do you have anything to say on either front? Fangio with the Niners or Fangio with the Dolphins?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to spark the Niners rumors as soon as Ryans leaves. Like, that's as long as ink is not to paper on the Dolphins deal, I think that's instantly going to happen. At the same time, if Rappaport thinks that Fangio is still ending up in Miami, then that's, I'm not going to say like Rappaport's right on everything all the time, but I feel like, between NFL Network's other news reporter reporting that it was a done deal and that going down, I think that's still the way the winds are blowing. But it is interesting. Like, you don't usually see somebody as prominent as Pelissero report something and then have it still be up in the air a few days later. Like, I would have been less surprised if it was fully overturned and he was going somewhere else by now. Because I feel like that just happens sometimes where a guy will pull the rug out from under a deal and head somewhere else. So the fact that it's still like this nebulous, like will he or won't he thing is pretty interesting to me, because I'm feeling like it becomes more confusing with each passing day.
I mean, the longer there's an absence, of course, I understand. I understand why he'd be confused there, or like why it would get so, unsettling and unsure. I'd love Fangio on the Dolphins. I said it on Monday, kid in a candy store type stuff, with the amount of defensive talent you have, and like Xavier Howard, Byron Jones, Devon Holland, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, even like UDFA guys like Kader Kohu, like a really strong, just core roster of guys you've got locked in for the near future to play with here. And I think any DC is going to make the most of it with this roster, but would be really exciting to see what Fangio could do with this. Would also be nuts with the Niners, obviously.
Yeah,
like
if you're going for like talented defensive players, I'm going to coach Nick Bosa and Fred Warner and Talanoa Hufanga.
Listen, I get it, but like, it's good either way. I was saying more like to build a new great defense, a new really strong defense to contend in the NFL. I think, the Dolphins would be a prime candidate to be like an up-and-comer next year.
It's a next chapter thing, It's like he's been to San Francisco, he's been to Denver, and these are the other two teams that are reportedly in the mix for his services, whether that's, fact or just rumor because he's been there before. But I like, go build something new. Go play with new toys.
Exactly. This in injury news. Got two pieces of quarterback news, one breaking. Let's start in San Francisco. Brock Purdy, torn UCL, out predicted 6 months. Fascinating 49ers quarterback situation coming up. Trey Lance is expected back for the 49ers preseason. However, he is recovering from ankle surgery that knocked him out in week 2. Jimmy Garoppolo, who started a majority of games for this team after Trey Lance's injury, current free agent and was expected to leave already. Brady will be ready for NFL preseason, but throws a wrench in the development. Again, a lot of people wish casting Tom Brady next year. That option is now off the table. Really fascinating opening for this 49ers team, especially like with the amount of talent they have in the building that is not currently available and that still very much needs developing.
Yeah, I mean, there's an obvious solution here, Cale. Just take another quarterback with your 7th round pick again this year, because maybe he's better than Brock Purdy. Who knows? Like, what?
Split the difference this time. You went 3 overall. You went dead last.
Go like, I got a 4th rounder. Nice. Yeah. I like it. Because, why would you make a big move when you've shown that, like, you're the team that can win with anyone at quarterback? I got it if it was Brady, regardless of the fact that Brady was 46, because that's a story, that's a homecoming, that's an all-time great, that commands a certain amount of respect. But, I mean, who are you realistically? Like, you're not going to go re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo. You traded all these assets for Lance. You're probably not going to, trade even more assets for a Lamar. Like, this is this is you have what you have, you see who's available, and maybe you draft somebody. But I'm really not against them drafting somebody. Like, not high, but you just saw what you got out of Brock Purdy. Like, maybe lightning strikes twice.
Additional quarterback news. This one just breaking. Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa has cleared concussion protocol. About 6 weeks since his, I believe it's second diagnosed, third supposed concussion. Tagovailoa previously made news during the week that he was not going to play in the Pro Bowl, which will lead us into our next story. Pro Bowl games, I apologize, because of this concussion. Good to see him clear it now, but still pretty deeply troubling. It took him nearly 2 months to do so.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how you want to read into it, right? Like, we're not in the room when he's undergoing concussion protocol. Like, I'm fine if they just wanted to try and negate every possible risk of, re-injury and keep him in the protocol as long as they could to keep assessing him. But at the end of the day, next season's going to roll around. And if he gets concussed again, it's going to be like, not only the biggest story, but you really start to worry for his long-term health. Forget football. So I'm already pretty much there worrying for his long-term health because, other players have had repeated concussions. We haven't seen other players have the fencing response on the field be, taken off on a headboard and then playing again mere weeks later. So it's really a scary continuing development. And you obviously want what's best for Tua, and Tua wants to keep playing football. So you just hope that works out for him.
Yes, you do. Of course. NFL, love your autoplay videos. Jackson, that leads us directly into his replacement for the Pro Bowl that he has vacated. It is Ravens backup quarterback Tyler Huntley.
What did he do this year? Tell me.
Jackson, he filled in for Lamar Jackson upon his injury, ends up with 2 total touchdowns on the season. That is the fewest ever passing touchdowns by a quarterback to make a Pro Bowl. Give me the pronunciation on that name, Jackson, because I will not try it.
I didn't come up with a pronunciation.
So you're a phonetics guy.
I should have. Can I just try it? Mike Borla, 1975 Eagles, I believe, was he threw 6 touchdowns and made the Pro Bowl. NFL may have evolved slightly.
Huntley did have 4 passing, 5 total. But
you're looking at the playoff. You're looking at the playoff game.
I am looking at the playoff game. 2 regular season, 1 rushing. Still very much under Barilla's here. The 3 quarterbacks starting for the AFC in the Pro Bowl games are Trevor Lawrence, Tyler Huntley, and Derek Carr. Jackson, thoughts?
I love Derek Carr's tweet about hey, maybe my invite got lost in the mail from previous years, and this is the year I finally made it. I love that it's in Vegas, and he is obviously seemingly on his way out of Vegas, but coming back into town for one more pit stop. Huntley is, this is the craziest story ever. Like, can you imagine if Brett Phillips was named an all-star in MLB or Juan Toscano Anderson was named an all-star in the NBA? Like, that's basically what this amounts to. Congrats to him. I'm sure that earns him some sort of long-term accolade. Like, even just putting it on your Pro Football Reference page is crazy. Jacoby Brissett had 600 DYAR this year and a 13% DVOA, and also threw for 1,950 more passing yards than Tyler Huntley. I'm not even a tinfoil hat conspiracy guy, but I'd be a little bit surprised if there wasn't some sort of behind the scenes stuff going on. Browns don't really want Brissett being named to the Pro Bowl because that makes Deshaun look bad. And the Ravens, who, are in this whole back and forth negotiation with Lamar, they're like, hey, we'd love if your replacement was named to the Pro Bowl. That gives us leverage. So just saying that Jacoby Brissett objectively should have made it over Tyler Huntley. And that's not even to include other quarterbacks who actually played full seasons.
These were 7, 8, and 9 on the Pro Bowl options for AFC quarterbacks. Mahomes obviously made the Super Bowl. Burrow was replaced. Josh Allen said he was out with an injury, but is playing in the Pebble Beach Pro-Am this week, which is interesting.
Respect. Love that.
Tagovailoa, Herbert, and Lamar Jackson were all unavailable due to various injuries. Yeah. Let's finally, with 4 minutes left in the show, get to Super Bowl news.
We can go over. We're good.
Does not start with happy news, Jackson. Philadelphia Eagles backup right guard Josh Sills has been indicted on rape and kidnapping charges from a case stemming back to 2019. Don't need to go too deep into it, but Sills was an undrafted free agent signed by the Eagles this season. This was an incident stemming back from December 2019. Like I said, there's currently a summons for him to appear in a Guernsey County Common Pleas Court on February 16th. The Eagles have made a general statement saying the organization is aware of the legal matters involving Josh Sills. We have been in communication with the league office and are in the process of gathering more information. We have no further comment at this time.
Dark. Really just in a day where everything, comes to light. I cannot believe that Sills has been on a roster for 3 full seasons with no implications while this was immediately reported. I don't know what that says about the Guernsey County Common Pleas Court and how long it takes them to indict people on such serious charges, but I really am just flabbergasted that this was able to go on for so long without coming to light. This is about as serious a crime as you can commit. Why is it not, it stinks because, you want to talk about positive stories throughout Super Bowl week. And I get that Josh Sills is not an impact player on the Eagles, but he, got his hat and t-shirt to celebrate being an NFC champion 2.5 days ago. And now this, and I think if you're the Eagles, the generalized statement is the first thing that needs to come out. But, if this drags on throughout Super Bowl week and he, might make the trip with the team or anything crazy like that is a dark cloud that this Super Bowl does not need, and one that I sincerely hope does not come to pass.
Eagles signed Sills in April of this year as an undrafted free agent. He appeared in 1 game for them against the Arizona Cardinals. Moving on, left guard Landon Dickerson for the Eagles is expected to play. Had hyperextended his elbow in the 4th quarter of the NFC Championship game. Number of Eagles end up getting a little banged up in this one. Lane Johnson also retore his adductor slightly. Is expected to still play. Or no, he retore it in the Giants game. Mind you, played partly in the 49ers game. Dickerson is expected to play with a brace. Johnson is expected to play through the injury. Again, Jackson, said in week 17, any given Sunday, this team needs as much rest as possible to embrace this Super Bowl run. They're getting it with the extra bye. But this offensive line is starting to fall apart by the threads.
Yeah, and this is, again, we talked on another program about how this team hasn't necessarily been tested, at least not by, the playoffs or even in the regular season, didn't particularly play close games against other good teams, barely played against other good teams, unless you count the 2 Cowboys games with backup quarterbacks going for someone in each. So, in some ways you worry because they're not tested. So who knows how they react if the Super Bowl is close, but it enables them to do stuff like resting Dickerson in the 4th quarter, going easy on Lane Johnson in the 49ers game. There's maybe, you can argue about drawbacks to all these blowouts, but from a health perspective, it's been a huge boon to them and allowed them to maintain health even through injury as much as possible. And that's what you're seeing with Dickerson here.
It's one of their strongest strongest aspects of their team, 6th in adjusted line yard, 18th in adjusted sack rate, 7th in power rank. And this is a Kansas City Chiefs team that dominated in the interior line against a backup Cincinnati Bengals line, courtesy of Chris Jones. Speaking of that Chiefs team, Chiefs have been in a couple Super Bowls recently, and this will be the first time in the Mahomes era that the Chiefs will wear white. Yes, Jackson, this is uniform news, and take it away.
Uniform news. Uniform news is all we have to go on with the Chiefs right now. If you go to Chiefs.com and look in the news section, it's all just post-game press stuff from the AFC Championship still, which is a good thing. Like, there's no big injury stories, big dramatic stories going on.
That being said, Jackson, it is oddly quiet considering
all the injuries.
Jarius Sneed still out with a concussion.
Yeah.
There were reports that Juju Smith-Schuster couldn't walk on his own after the game to the team locker room. There's additional injuries to Kadarius Toney and Mecole Hardman. You've got the injuries to Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. You also have injuries to Willie Gay and Nick Bolton. Like, there's a lot of injury news that we should be getting, and we have not. So all we've got is uniform news.
Now, Cale, when you think about Chiefs white uniforms, what color pants are you picturing?
Red.
Red, yes. So for the most part, they always wear red. They wear white maybe once or twice a year. And in the back of my head, I was like, I expect that they'll wear red. But let me just do my research before I come on here and tell you that they're going to wear red. And while I cannot confirm via any official statement that they'll be wearing red pants, I certainly expect it because the Chiefs lost Super Bowl I to the Green Bay Packers in white pants. And notoriously superstitious head coach Hank Stram then banned the team from wearing the white-on-white combo for the next 20 years. So I don't expect that they'll pull it back out for this Super Bowl. Red pants for the Chiefs, calling it first.
This is what you come to the FO News Show, folks.
Accurate.
50-plus-year-old uniform statistics.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to get it anywhere else. What a way to close out this edition of the FO News Show. Want you, as always, shout out FO Plus, footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. All of our paywall content, all of our statistics. You get access to the All 32, which is going to get a complete film breakdown for Derek Klassen for the Super Bowl. Any of our DVOA stuff, any of our gambling picks before the biggest gambling day of the year, any of our fantasy picks. If you want to get one last best ball game in for the Super Bowl or one last daily fantasy for the Super Bowl, 2 decades of almanac that would have told you the Eagles were pretty high favorites to make this game when few other outlets were. You check the receipts. We got 2 decades worth of them sitting in the almanac section. Always got to shout out FO Plus.
And Cale, this is our program, and isn't there a way that they can use your name, your good name, to get a little bit of a discount?
That they can, Jackson. Use code Cale for 10% off. I know the show has one. I don't have it off top. But if you use Cale, you're guaranteed 10% off that FO Plus subscription. That'll do it for us at the FO News Show. Next week, we'll have all the latest from Media Week, from Monday Night Media Roundup, all the latest on all those Chiefs injuries and some Eagles ones. Hopefully, if they don't stay dark on us. For Jackson, I'm Cale. We'll see you guys next week, Super Bowl edition.
Sure.